Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
Today we're looking at the champion of CARICOM and the things that he's done. But before we get into that conversation, we got the news yesterday from the United States of America about Marcus Garvey. Now, what does that mean to you, the pardoning of Marcus Garvey?
Well, you know, I'm in two minds about it. I mean, the family wanted him pardoned. There was a campaign. CARICOM heads of government weighed in. Our own Prime Minister wrote personally and confidentially to President Biden, urging that not that he be pardoned, but that he be exonerated, because that was our feeling, that the conviction was fraudulent, was unjust, and pardon suggests that you have done something wrong, and you're being pardoned for that wrong. Whereas exoneration says you had never done anything wrong in the first place. You should not even have been charged. So I would much prefer an exoneration. But the family felt very strongly that this pardon, presidential pardon, was a step in the right direction in terms of clearing that kind of cloud over Marcus Garvey's name. So we all celebrated. But honestly, Pearson, for me, you know, an unjust conviction where one is persecuted for a righteous cause, to me, that in a sense is a badge of honor. So I have never seen that unjust conviction as something to be shameful about. I have always seen it. Marcus Garvey was such a formidable foe of, you know, white supremacy, that racism, that they went to great lengths to try to derail him. It's a badge of honor.
It's a badge of honor. The year was 1987, June the 1st. Where were you?
Well, I remember that night when we got the news. We all headed to DLP headquarters in George Street, and I remember the solemnity of that night as we were reflecting on the untimely passing of Mr. Barrow. You know, I had the good fortune to know him personally. He did me the honor of inviting me to serve his administration in the Senate. In fact, at that time, I was the youngest senator in Barbados's history. So it was a real blow for me personally that Mr. Barrow had left us after just about 1 year in office as Prime Minister.
It took everyone by surprise. And so at that time in 1987, I recall we invited yourself as well as the man who later became Prime Minister of Barbados, David Thompson. And so I want to play a little bit of that, and then we'll come back and talk right after.
He always reiterated that cry, although not in the same words, that Bob Marley, another distinguished Caribbean hero, had said in his redemption song, "Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery, for none but ourselves can free our minds."
Develop our integrity, our identity as a Caribbean people, and develop totally as a region. I think that, to my mind, that is one of the greatest of ERROL Barrow's legacies.
And so when you look at the legacy today, Ambassador, have we fulfilled the legacy as you saw it then?
Well, the first thing is, Pearson.
The here.
No, not the here. It is so striking because the question that would have been posed to me at that time is, you know, if you had to focus on some aspect of Mr. Barrow that you think is, you know, maybe very important or the most important. And back then, I zeroed in on Mr. Barrow, the Caribbean integrationist, the CARICOM man.
Yes.
And here it is, how many years later? 30-something years later, as ambassador to CARICOM, I am now on his 105th anniversary of his birth, focusing once again on the fact that he was the champion, perhaps the champion par excellence of Caribbean integration and of the Caribbean community. You know, there are many aspects to Mr. Barrow's legacy, but surely, surely, right there at the top of the list is his achievements in the field of Caribbean integration.
Well, let's talk about that for just a little bit then. Could you list a few, not necessarily in descending or ascending order, a list of the few of the things that you thought that on that stage he spoke about to enhance or to develop CARICOM?
Well, you know, first of all, I mean, he was actually if you wanted to single out an architect of CARICOM, you would say Mr. Barrow. I mean, and even prior to CARICOM, you know, he came to office in 1961 on the verge of the total collapse of the West Indies Federation. Jamaica had just had its referendum. Jamaica had just pulled out of the Federation when Mr. Barrow, 2 months later, won the government. And to his credit, his first instinct was to try to save what was left of the Federation. He won office. He immediately traveled to Trinidad to meet with Eric Williams to say, look, let Barbados and Jamaica has pulled out, but let us come together and save the Federation. Eric Williams did not cooperate. Eric Williams, in fact, said 1 from 10 leaves not.
Yes.
And Trinidad pulled out. And then, to Mr. Barrow's credit, heroically, he said, okay, Trinidad and Jamaica have gone. Barbados will lead the way. We will try to keep the others together. We'll create a federation of the little 8. And then Grenada pulled out. He said, we will try to create a federation of the little 7. And then St. Lucia pulled out. And we will go on. Eventually, Antigua and Montserrat, and eventually the whole thing collapsed. So that effort collapsed, and it was out of that collapse that Mr. Barrow had this brainwave. You know, we have failed with the political union. Let us pursue the unity gradually through economic integration. And hence he came up with the idea of the Caribbean Free Trade Area. CARIFTA, the Caribbean Free Trade Association. He brought together Forbes Burnham of Guyana. Antigua subsequently joined, and by 1968, CARIFTA was on its way. But he always understood that the free trade area was to evolve into a custom union and a common market. That is, was to evolve into CARICOM. And so so said, so done. By 1973, he was there at Chaguaramas, signing the Treaty of Chaguaramas to set CARICOM on its way in 1973. And as part of that setting CARICOM on its way, he engineered another very significant thing. He and Michael Manley and Forbes Burnham and Eric Williams, who were then the 4 prime ministers of the independent countries, decided, look, we must have a collective foreign policy. And the first thing we will do in that collective foreign policy is to recognize the Caribbean nation of Cuba, the nation that the United States and the Organization of American States had isolated. And so, in a very brave move for these 4 small Caribbean countries to stand up to the mighty USA and the OAS and say, no, we are not following your prescriptions. We are independent. We see no reason to isolate Cuba. We will recognize Cuba. And that broke the ice, because once that was done, all the other countries of our hemisphere fell in line, and they too recognized Cuba. So, those are monumental achievements of Mr. Barrow, setting first CARIFTA and then CARICOM on its way.
And that goes beautifully as well with his final speech, what we call the mirror image speech.
Yes, yeah. Well, yes, in Barbados, his major final domestic speech in that 1986 election campaign that I was a part of. Yes, a brilliant speech telling us to look within, look at ourselves, you know. When we look in the mirror, what do we see? Are we happy with what we see? So he was asking us to take a deep and profound look into our own society and where we wanted to go as a nation and a people. And all these years later, that speech In fact, I would say the mirror image, the idea of the mirror image has become part of the folklore and
Yes.
folk heritage of Barbados.
When you look at the strategy of ERROL BARROW then, and you look at where we are and the strategies now, how do they compare, in your opinion?
Well, you know, it's interesting you ask that, because I brought along here, this is a booklet that I produced in my role as ambassador to CARICOM back in 2020 to celebrate Mr. Barrow's centenary. And this booklet it features two of his speeches. One, the speech he made when he actually signed the Treaty of Chagaramas, but secondly, the final speech he made to a CARICOM Heads of Government conference in Guyana in 1986, after he had, you know, won the election and become Prime Minister of Barbados. And that speech is so futuristic, because when he makes several points. For example, in that speech, he sent a message to all CARICOM countries. We have to go after food security. What is the big flagship project of CARICOM in 2025?
25 by 25.
It is a 25 by 25. You know, so Mr. Barrow saw that so clearly 30-something years ago. Secondly, he said in this speech, the Caribbean must be a zone of peace, you know? And that has proven to be, that idea of our region being a zone of peace has proven to be so helpful to us, because I can tell you, at several times since I've been CARICOM ambassador, we have had challenges to peace in the region, centered around Venezuela, the United States, people wanting to intervene in our region. And we have always been able to go back to that doctrine.
Yeah.
That has guided us. Listen, no intervention, peaceful settlement of disputes, because our region is a zone of peace, you know, and we have even taken that to the United Nations. But another critical point he made in this speech that I think we still need to explore. Well, you know, he made the point that, look, our Caribbean integration has to be about more than just trade and economic matters. We go way beyond that. We are one people. We share a common history,
Yes.
a common heritage. But he also went on to say that over the centuries, we have developed a common stock of collective wisdom, our people, that help them to be able to survive and to transcend all of the oppression. And it is that common stock of wisdom that we must tap into. Our government structures, our governance structures must tap into that collective stock of wisdom that resides among the masses of our people. And he said to the university, yes, university, you have created a lot of technical knowledge, but you know, you haven't linked that technical knowledge to the broad masses of our people. And you need to do that. And so the intellectual class needs to bind with the masses of the people, and then the governance structures need to tap into all of that collective wisdom and insight and understanding. And I think that is such a powerful idea, such a powerful vision for us. And I think it still largely remains unrealized. It is still work to be done, you know, to really create the Caribbean civilization that he always envisaged and saw himself as a citizen of.
And that we don't have to wait for someone else to do it for us. We can do this ourselves. We have that same collective wisdom, that same collective spirit to be able, as the people of the region, to pull ourselves together, to pull ourselves out of. And so that continues still to be one of the resounding messages of our leaders today. What a man. And I would have loved to have known what would he say today had he been alive at 105. ERROL Walton Barrow.
You know, the final message he left in that last speech to CARICOM, virtually his final words were, he plucked out a quotation from Jose Marti, Cuba's national hero, and it said, "A true man does not seek the path where advantage lies, but rather the path where duty lies. And that is the only practical man whose dream of today will be the law of tomorrow, because he knows that without a single exception, the future lies on the side of duty. And I think, I think that is an eternal message that he was sending to all of us in the Caribbean. The path of duty, the importance of assuming all of us, all of us assuming our duty to make our Caribbean what it ought to be, an authentic Caribbean civilization.
Time for reprint, Ambassador. The book is called The Right Excellent ERROL Barrow, Champion of the Caribbean Community, written and produced by His Excellency David Comissiong. And so hopefully we'll get that reprint. I know they're all sold out by now.
Well, I printed 1,000 copies in 2020 and gave them away. So they're floating all around, all over Barbados. But yes, this is the final copy that I have left. So time for a reprint in 2025.
Thank you so much as always. And again, bringing such sage wisdom to our understanding of things in CARICOM, and on today about ERROL Walton Barrow, Right Excellent National Hero of Barbados, and understanding the mind of the man to be able to understand the path we now trod. Thank you so much, Ambassador.
My pleasure, Pearson.
You're
Thanks.
welcome. Ambassador David Comissiong, Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM, as we continue our look at the man, the champion of CARICOM.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.